This is a brief overview of my daily commute from Deep Cove to Vancouver by bike. I thought I'd put this together to show the cycling infrastructure available on this route, and to offer some constructive feedback to the district of North Vancouver and the city of Vancouver. We start here on Dollarton Highway. Right away, just getting out of the cove, I'm kind of stuck between a rock and a hard place. Do I take Mount Seymour Parkway with the massive hill and the high speeds, but which does at least have a painted bike lane? Or do I take Dollarton with its gentler slopes, slower speeds, and painted sharrows? Most of the time I choose Dollarton, but honestly it's a bit of a toss-up. There is no good way to get out of the cove, at least not until the Spirit Trail is built. Even then, we still really need separated cycling infrastructure along both Dollarton and Mount Seymour Parkway, especially for commuters. The intersections around here are really bad. If you're coming up Dollar Road, coming up here, say going shopping, or if you're a kid trying to bike to school, you basically have to stop on this slope with poor visibility and hope that cars slow down. You could bike to the left side and use the pedestrian crosswalk, but it's really not set up for bikes. I'd love to see a two-way separated path constructed along the south side of Dollar Road. This would not only line up with the existing crossing lights, but it would connect to the future Spirit Trail down on Beachview, as well as the Dollarton Shopping Centre and Sherwood Park Elementary School. Sherwood Park would then also connect to the Spirit Trail connection further west. Ideally, you could also extend the bike paths from Mount Seymour Parkway down to Fairview and connect the whole thing up, avoiding the steep hill entirely. Anyway, you'll notice here on Dollarton that there are houses on the left, but no sidewalks. People living here have to cross 50 kilometers per hour traffic just to go have coffee or to get their groceries. You'll see lots of similar housing situations along Dollarton just like this, again with very poor accessibility. Ideally, I'd like to see the speed limit on Dollarton lowered to something more reasonable, like 30 or 40. Remember, this is a residential street. I also mentioned before that I'd like to see cycling infrastructure all along Dollarton, even if they do put in the Spirit Trail. I think the best way to do this would be to narrow the road by putting in a sidewalk on the left and a two-way multi-use pathway on the right, while lowering the speed limit. If you look closely, you'll see there's easily enough room to make this happen. Dollarton is super wide. We wouldn't even have to move any of the poles or anything. I'm sure everybody knows this already, but we really do need to make residential streets safer. They're really not right now. The survivability rate when a pedestrian is hit by a vehicle moving at 30 kilometers per hour is around 80%, but at 50 kilometers per hour, that survivability rate drops to just 20%. There's no good reason whatsoever for residential streets to have 50 kilometers per hour speed limits, and narrower, slower streets save lives. The stats don't lie. Also, some sections like this hill here basically already have everything I'm talking about. A sidewalk on the left and a super wide sidewalk on the right with room for a two-way multi-use pathway if we wanted. This could maybe be extended a bit more, and I'd like to see it smoothed out. Like, all these driveways where the sidewalks dip down could probably be raised an inch or so for pedestrians and cyclists, so we could avoid all the bumpy ups and downs. Basically, instead of pedestrians and cyclists coming down to the same level as cars, cars should have to come up to the same level as pedestrians and cyclists. Lots of other municipalities have figured this out already, and I'll show you an example later on to give you an idea about what I'm talking about. You'll see here at Ravenwoods one of the district's many slip lanes. I really don't know how these are still legal, especially in residential areas like this. They are incredibly dangerous for pedestrians and cyclists, and really don't serve any purpose except as a means to allow drivers to sort of speed through intersections without slowing down. I guess they might make sense for highways, but even then, I'm really not convinced. So this next section is really terrible. Here you can see the sidewalks disappear entirely, meaning there's no protection whatsoever for pedestrians and cyclists. If you're in a wheelchair, tough luck. The sidewalks do come back here and there, but it's incredibly inconsistent. At least the speed limit on the Tsleil-Waututh streets is 40. Areas like this could really benefit from a major overhaul, though. Leaving the Tsleil-Waututh Nation, we're back up to 50 kilometers per hour, and again, there are really inconsistent with sidewalks here. In a moment, you'll see the sidewalks disappear entirely again, which again is just crazy to me. There we go. No more sidewalks. Just a narrow strip on either side of the street that cyclists and pedestrians are sort of expected to share in both directions. Finally, we get to a separated multi-use path. However, I'm not going to use it for this stretch, as it's extremely inconvenient to use. Not only are there multiple slip lanes that cyclists are expected to traverse through, but there are also bollards, seemingly to prevent vehicles from using the paths. These, bollards aren't inherently bad, but the way they're used on the paths is terrible, as they're very poorly placed and they just get in the way of cyclists. It's a shame because it's a very nice path otherwise. It just has those major faults. Instead, I like to use Old Dollar Road. There are fewer intersections and there's much less traffic. It's a bit annoying to get back onto Dollarton, but it's much better than the alternative. I do want to take a moment to talk about those Lime bikes that you might have spotted earlier. I'm kind of baffled by these. On the one hand, the Lime bikes are very, very high quality and much easier to use compared to the Mobi bikes in the city of Vancouver. However, they're also much more expensive, like Uber is often cheaper, and therefore impractical as an actual car replacement. I would like to see a monthly or yearly unlimited pass option similar to Mobi bike share in the city of Vancouver. Otherwise, I just don't see these as a solution for commuters. Another problem is that these Lime bikes are just dumped on the sidewalks. I don't want North Vancouver to turn into like Seattle or Portland. Bike shares like this need to have designated areas for finding and returning bikes. These can just be painted geofenced areas, that's fine, but I don't want to see e-bikes cluttering sidewalks as they are right now, where they block pedestrians and people in wheelchairs. The district in North Vancouver really needs to work with the city of Vancouver on this. Bike share programs are great, but not when you have to sign up for 2 different services just to get around. Think of the bridges. If we really want to reduce traffic, we need to be able to take bike shares over the Ironworkers or Lionsgate bridges. I would much rather see Mobi come to North Vancouver, frankly. They're much more affordable than Lime. You can get an unlimited pass for $130-something a month. But another option would be to work with Vancouver and Lime to allow people to commute over the bridges. And again, to lower the prices and make it so they actually have geofenced areas where you can consistently find a bike. Speaking of bridges, getting onto the Ironworkers Bridge by bike is a massive chore. First, you have to cross a highway slip lane and hope that cars slow down and let you cross. I was lucky here today, but honestly, they mostly don't slow down. Next, you have to unintuitively cross the left-hand side of the road, where they have this terrible pedestrian crossing button. Seriously, why did they place this stupid sign right above here? I scrape my arm on it all the time. It's super awkward to reach for the beg button. Frankly, they should just remove the stop and dismount sign, as that's a terrible backwards way to approach traffic safety. No cyclist in the world is going to get off their bike to cross a street, only to then get back onto the bike lane and continue along the bike path. This is a bike route. What are you doing? Next, you have to go up on this narrow path, which I'm honestly not sure if it's supposed to be a one-way or a two-way path. I think it's two-way because it leads to a massive wide pathway, but the directions aren't clear. Again, I can't use the other side of the road regardless, so this is what I use. Finally, you get to another highway on-ramp crossing. At least this time there's a crossing button, but it's so incredibly inconvenient to use as a cyclist. You have to reach all over there, get in the dirt and everything, so I rarely use it. I'm really hoping some of these issues are addressed when the Fibs Exchange renovation is finally finished. The bridge itself isn't too bad once you're on it. It can be pretty smelly with all the car pollution, and the view is somewhat ruined by all the high metal bars they put up to stop suicides. But otherwise it's not terrible, and it feels great to coast through it when the bridge is clogged with traffic. The biggest issue is that it's just a one-way path for cycling on each side. I'd love to see two-way multi-use pathways on either side, though I understand that may not be feasible. Honestly, a better solution would just be to make it so that getting on and off the bridge isn't terrible. Getting off the bridge into Vancouver is pretty terrible. It's a steep, narrow path that's shared with pedestrians in both directions.
You really got to trim these.
The turns are okay, except at the bottom. At the bottom, you have to choose between either heading down an extremely narrow tunnel that's shared between pedestrians and cyclists in both directions, followed by a super steep hill, or like what I do, you take a super sharp turn right, where, if you mess up, you just fall into traffic, as they didn't bother extending the guardrail to protect cyclists here. Next, you head down a narrow sidewalk that's meant to be shared with pedestrians, and then go into the road, because the bike path is literally unusable here. Seriously, you can't see it from here, but the roots have just grown so much, and it's incredibly bumpy, that nobody actually uses the bike path. It's a shame, because right after that terrible bumpy part, there's a lovely brand new separated path with nice smooth asphalt, but there's no easy way to get to it. After this, it's not too bad. I mentioned back in North Vancouver that I would show an example of a multi-use path mixing well with a driveway. So this here is a great example of one right here, painted in green. I'm able to get onto the separated bike path extremely smoothly because they took the time to ensure that the transition was gradual and easy for cyclists without compromising drivers at all. Like, it's not bumpy at all going through here. So great work here. We should implement this in the District of North Vancouver if and when they ever implement any multi-use paths along Dollarton. The parking lot here isn't too bad, though I do have some suggestions. See, there's already a nice pedestrian path to the right, which could easily be widened into a two-way multi-use path. It would be a nice touch, and it would fully separate cyclists from cars. It's not high on my priority list, but it would be nice. You could even extend it up to Wall Street and maybe have a multi-use path continue down there. Wall Street itself is always nice and quiet thanks to the 30 kilometers per hour speed limit and occasional speed bumps. Some of these stop signs here could be replaced by raised crosswalks or roundabouts, but overall it really isn't bad. The streets are wide enough that you could easily extend a two-way multi-use path all the way down Wall Street on the right, which would be nice for avoiding all the intersections. But again, it's pretty nice as is, if not a little bit bumpy in parts. I swear, all these damn cyclists keep speeding through stop signs. I'm not sure what the solution is for a dangerous cyclist like this, except that we need to make our streets safer. Right now, it's mostly more of the extreme risk-taking cyclists that are willing to cycle along our relatively dangerous streets. If we make our streets safer, we'll get more safe, cautious cyclists into the mix, which will force the dangerous cyclists to slow down. At least, I hope. For this next part, I usually take a left up to Adenac Street. This is because there's a pretty major cycling gap along Powell Street. It's very strange. You can easily cycle, as I've done, along Wall Street, and there's excellent cycling infrastructure on Powell starting on McLean Drive, but there's this gap in between. Thankfully, it looks like the City of Vancouver is looking to fill this gap in the near future via the Portside Greenway Improvement Project. This should include cycling improvements to basically all the way from the bridge to Carroll Street, including improvements to Alexander Street as well. I'm really looking forward to it, though apparently construction won't start until 2025. Don't know why, but anyway. I also want to point out the Moby bikes here in the city of Vancouver and how much better they are compared to those Lime bikes in the district. To be clear, the district bikes are much higher quality, but Moby bikes are much better implemented. They can always be found at the same bike racks, which makes them a reliable option for commuting. Plus, they cost almost nothing. You can get an unlimited yearly pass for just $139 a year. For comparison, I tried borrowing 2 Lime bikes for 40 minutes with a friend the other day. It cost us $35. $35. Regardless of what happens with these bike share programs, we need better options for signing up. Moby bikes are especially bad in this regard. You have to sign up on the app, choose your plan, enter the credit card details, then enter a 6-digit user code on the bike, followed by a 4-digit passcode. That whole process seriously puts off new users. And again, Lime is much better in that regard. Back in 2019, TransLink introduced a pilot program that integrated a whole bunch of services onto a single Compass card. You could use Transit, Moby Bike Share, Evo, and Moto car shares, all with one card. It was brilliant, and I've been waiting for them to introduce it to the general public ever since. So come on, TransLink. Everybody wants this. We're just passing some of the recently put in yellow concrete barriers. These are meant to calm traffic along residential streets, essentially forcing cars to slow down, especially at intersections. I love them personally, though I keep hearing about some cars getting stuck on them. I mean, frankly, if you're so distracted that your car gets stuck on one of these bright yellow concrete barriers, I really don't want you driving in residential neighborhoods. Kids aren't painted yellow, and they're easier to hit. As you can tell, this is a pretty big detour, all because of that cycling gap on Powell. We're now on Adenac, which is a pretty good cycling route into Vancouver. There are some areas where I'd like to see an option for, a crossing button or something. Sometimes the cars just don't slow down here. Actually, most of these major cycling intersections could seriously benefit from automatic bike detector loops on the streets. These are just like the ones that exist for cars, and they have them on bike paths all over the Netherlands. One distinct feature is that they have loops at the intersections and also before the intersection. So at the intersection and before the intersection. This means that if the intersection is clear, you will, just by driving along, or biking along, you will make the light green for you by the time you get to the intersection. They do this in the Netherlands for bikes and cars, and it blows my mind that apparently nobody wants to implement this here in North America. This weird zigzag street up here could use some work. None of the cyclists who go through here stop at the stop sign. I think there's some plan in the works to remove that stop sign and disallow car traffic going right, and I hope that gets implemented. Although, I would like to see just more cyclists obey the rules of the road, frankly. This is another residential neighborhood that needs to replace its stop signs, but here I think they need to replace them with raised crosswalks. This not only forces drivers to slow down where they're supposed to, but it also forces them to come up to the same level of pedestrians as opposed to pedestrians coming down to the level of cars, like we discussed earlier. Here's an example of a raised crosswalk. So this one's almost too high, but I really like that it's here. I believe they're starting to install some of these in the city of North Vancouver, which is great. This is another intersection that could seriously use a few bike detectors. Like, seriously, they cost almost nothing to put in. You just need a concrete saw and some wire. Like, we even have dedicated bike-only lanes leading up to it, perfect for putting in detection loops. Like, come on, Vancouver. Or detection loops for bikes. Or just any detection loops for bikes. This intersection here leading up to the Dunsmuir Viaduct is a little strange. When the light turns green, cyclists are expected to crisscross, intersecting with each other in the middle. It's not too bad though, seeing as cyclists are not cars and can handle these kinds of multi-direction intersections. I've heard talk about the Dunsmuir Viaduct being torn down at some point in the future to be replaced by a nice green pathway underneath. Apparently it's not earthquake-proof, like the Dunsmuir Viaduct, and it would apparently just come crashing down in the event of a big one. I really hope they get onto that soon. These are really nice separated paths here in Vancouver, although, as usual, they really need to build more. I'm lucky that I'm able to take these almost entirely to where I work downtown, but again, we just need more. That said, I'm really confused as to why Vancouver traffic is set to 50 kilometers per hour. It really doesn't make any sense considering the massive amount of pedestrians on the streets at any given time. Really, most of downtown Vancouver should be no more than 30, at least if we value pedestrian safety. Plus, if you've ever been downtown, you know that some idiots love to rev their sports cars loudly at insane speeds down narrow streets from one red light to another. This isn't just dangerous, it's also incredibly disruptive to all the people outside trying to enjoy their lunch in cafes. I'd really love to see cops give out noise pollution tickets to the loud motorcyclists. I'll end here by pointing out one last cycling gap. Right here at the Burrard SkyTrain station, the two-way bike path just kind of ends, seemingly for no reason, just to be replaced by a painted thing on the road that is just one direction. It's so close to Stanley Park. We really just need to have it continue for just a few more blocks. Also, these middle-of-the-road bike lanes are just awful. Nobody can pass safely, and you're exposed to drivers on both sides. Let's maybe not have bike lanes that you wouldn't want your kids to use. Like, seriously, would you be comfortable with your kids going on these painted bike lanes? No. Anyway, thanks for watching. I love cycling to work. It's a great way to avoid the gym and save incredible amounts of money that would otherwise be spent on car ownership. I recommend everyone give it a try, and I recommend that the District of North Vancouver and the City of Vancouver please look at the suggestions in this video. In the next video, I'll show my commute back home, which is surprisingly different in a lot of ways.